ARA was going through a divorce when she met Lucas. Her ex-husband, Samuel, had left her for a younger co-worker. Their daughter, Ella, chose to stay with her mom in the midst of the divorce proceedings. ARA met Lucas by chance at a coffee shop. She was sitting with a stack of papers related to obtaining a dissolution of marriage certificate. Lucas struck up a conversation and offered to get to know her. Exhausted by recent events, ARA couldn't refuse his friendly gesture. Lucas turned out to be a pleasant and fun guy. When it was time to part ways, ARA mustered up the courage to ask him for his phone number. She immediately shared the news with her friend, who did not approve of her actions. The friend voiced concerns that Lucas might turn out to be a stranger, or worse, a maniac. ARA replied that all men are strangers, but life must go on, and she didn't want to be alone. ARA and Lucas began dating. He asked her out on dates, always brought her flowers, and courted her lavishly. One day, Lucas surprised her by inviting her on an all-expense-paid trip to the sea. All she had to do was ask for time off work and agree to go. She enjoyed Lucas's attention and appreciated his care, as her previous husband had been rather stingy in this regard. While on vacation at the sea, Lucas proposed to her as they sat on the beach together, watching the sunset and enjoying a glass of chilled wine. Lucas gave ARA a small box with the words, "I want to spend the rest of my life watching sunsets with you." Touched by his sincere gesture, she cried and accepted his offer. Wasting no time, they started preparing for the wedding as soon as they got home. A friend to whom ARA had previously told about Lucas inquired about how it had gone. Lucas informed ARA that he had saved up enough money for the wedding and that he would allow them to have a lavish celebration. ARA couldn't believe her happiness. Her first wedding had been simple, even without a white dress, because she and Samuel had gotten married right out of college when they were poor, but deeply in love. Sometimes she even cried with happiness, realizing that everything that was happening now was happening for her. Everything was falling into place. ARA's friend Stella brought up the subject of children. "Have you talked about having more children?" she asked. ARA calmly replied, "We decided that Ella was enough for us." Her friend asked further, "Doesn't Lucas want to have a child of his own? After all, Ella has someone else's blood." This infuriated ARA. Lucas had never treated Ella differently. He had always been a loving father to her, taking her to coffee shops, ice cream shops, and movies, picking her up from school, and taking her to activities. They had come to the conclusion that they only wanted one child. When Ella got older, they planned to go traveling, and having a young child would make that difficult. Plus, ARA was already 35 years old and didn't want to go through the hassle of pregnancy and infancy again. The wedding was a grand success. There were many guests. The tables were filled with delicious food and champagne flowed. The next morning, Lucas was preparing breakfast. ARA woke up, walked into the kitchen, and lovingly hugged her husband from behind. Lucas smiled and asked, "How was your first night as my wife?" ARA laughed and replied, "Well, I was expecting some kind of miraculous transformation, but everything stayed." Lucas's parents lived in a small village, 30 km from the city. As a loving son, he often visited them, either for a vacation or at his mother's request. ARA gladly accompanied him on these trips, enjoying their conversations along the way. One morning, After a hearty breakfast, they set off, leaving their daughter with ARA's mother. Despite the rainy weather, the highway was clear, allowing Lucas to drive quickly to his parents' home. During the ride, the couple talked about what they had been up to lately. ARA talked about her new job, which she had started 4 months ago, and shared anecdotes about coworkers and bosses. Just as she mentioned the new project they were working on, an unforeseen event occurred. Her husband lost control of the car, causing it to flip over and fall into a ditch. ARA hit her head during the accident and lost consciousness. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, Lucas, suffering from an apparent chest fracture and nosebleed, attempted to call for an ambulance, but noticed people rushing towards them from the side of the road. Confident that help was arriving, the couple waited for it. At the hospital, Lucas received the necessary medical attention for his injuries, particularly a cut on his hand from shards of glass during the accident. In addition, ARA underwent emergency surgery due to internal bleeding. While Lucas was resting under medication in his room, a doctor came in to give him an update. Several hours had passed since ARA had been taken to the operating room, and the doctor informed Lucas that, despite successful intervention to stop the bleeding, the pregnancy could not be saved. The news left Lucas in shock and disbelief. "I apologize for the confusion," the doctor said. When Lucas asked the doctor about the delivery date, the doctor explained that, at this stage of the pregnancy, it was difficult to determine an exact date, but it could be around 12 to 14 weeks. Lucas looked skeptical and asked if the doctor had checked him thoroughly. He shared that he thought he couldn't have children and had consulted a doctor when he was 20 years old. In panic, they looked at each other, both realizing where this was going. The next morning, Lucas was allowed to visit his wife in the hospital. He was shocked by her appearance. There were bruises on her body and clear IV tubes attached to her. Even though the doctor had told him this, Lucas decided not to share this information with his wife. They talked briefly, and then Lucas left ARA to rest. He was overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions. A week later, Lucas sat by ARA's bedside and told her about the latest news. They would have to buy a new car because the old one was beyond repair. ARA listened, and a faint smile appeared on her face. Suddenly, she grabbed Lucas's hand and looked him seriously in the eye. She admitted that she had something to confess. She had been holding it in as punishment. She had cheated and betrayed him. Lucas nodded, realizing what kind of punishment she meant. He already knew everything from day one, and yet he couldn't explain to himself why he was still there, harboring resentment for ARA's actions. To complicate things further, ARA revealed that she had met the man at work, and they had been together for a while. However, she stopped their meetings after only 3 times. Unfortunately, by then, it was too late. She was already pregnant. ARA was faced with the difficult choice of breaking up with her husband or letting go of her unborn child and released from the hospital. But after that, they would file for divorce. He followed through with his decision. It wasn't easy for Lucas to break the routine, as he had grown attached to both ARA and her daughter. However, there was no alternative, and they had to go their separate ways. Lucas tried to put his ex-wife out of his mind. The only time he heard from her was when mutual acquaintances mentioned that ARA had quit her old job and moved to another city. As for himself, Lucas was determined never to marry again. He loved ARA, but she had betrayed him, and he wasn't ready to open up to someone new. Love allowed him to forgive a lot of things, but when she was gone, everything became meaningless.